I was just going to say, what in sci-fi do you think of the series that have actually done really well with designing ships and things that are pretty accurate or pretty what's the word I'm looking for?
Obeys the laws of physics.
Realism. Yeah, that's a bit of realism to them. Obeys the laws of physics. Actually, if you were going to build a starship, it's what it would be like, or could be. And what the series that you just think, no, why do the ships look like that? It's like, and I'll throw in the hat straight away. Star Trek. There is absolutely no reason why all the Federation starships look like that. I know they say it's to do with like warp and stuff, but a Borg cube can go through warp, and it doesn't bother it. So why do all the starships look all that pretty?
Probably the best that really does work hard to get it right is The Expanse. Hands down. The when the script is written, the type of the colors of the paper they use shows the type of gravity that they're in. You know, is it high gravity? Is it on Earth? Is it on a station? You know, or is it weightless? I mean, they go to so far to get it right is they color code the pages depending on what kind of gravity the actors are allegedly exposed. If you have to create a warp shell, let's just, sticking with, whatever they explain on like Memory Alpha or whatever, or Wikipedia or whatnot, it seems to be that the nacelles would have to be symmetrical. Mm-hmm. And encompass the entirety of the spacecraft. Like the dish of the Enterprise would be in the middle, not in front.
Yep.
The warp shell would also deal with bits and particles of micrometeoroids or so whatever in front of the starship, which is also the deflector dish should be the biggest thing on it, because if you're flying at multiples
would be
logarithms of the speed of light, then the potential energy of an impact is astronomical, no pun intended.
Yeah, well, that's why it projects there's a lot of power that goes through the Star Trek deflector array, and it projects a beam in front of it. But yeah, I agree with you, that'd be enormous.
Kevin McCabe also mentions Battlestar Galactica, and they did a pretty good job of the space scenes. There's no sound in space. You hear the radio chatter. You hear whatever noise you hear is coming from the pilot's point of view of the whir of the engines or the APU or the radios or whatever. Adama asked Starbuck, "What do you hear?" And she says, "Nothing but the rain," and it's the micrometeoroids hitting the canopy.
One of the few shows, I think they do it quite a lot there's quite a few like anime and stuff where I think they do a really nice job. But actually the series of Firefly, I thought they did a really nice job with one of the they didn't for the movie, but in the series, obviously the Firefly looks the way it does, and it's got streamline, it's got engines, and it's slightly some aerodynamics factors to it, but because it comes into atmosphere. But then the inner core planets have these big cruisers, but they look like little cities. They were, had a base and had like towers that look like buildings almost.
Like skyscrapers.
And things. And actually, I really always thought that is perfect, because aerodynamics don't matter. You can build a ship to be whatever. You just, you can slap an engine on the ISS and fly it to the moon if you want to. There's no structural reason why it doesn't have to be anything like as strong. You can make really big ships in space, and it doesn't have to be as strong as what you expect, because it doesn't have to go into an atmosphere.
Well, there are structural things you have to take into account, like the skyscraper thing. Is really bad design, because here you have the basic ship, and there's all these little skyscrapers on top.
Yeah.
Well, if the thrusters were on this side, right, the edge, so all of the skyscrapers would be under a tremendous force to bend back. So you have a lot of the possibility of structural failure along this line here, along the edge of the skyscraper. So you'd have it bending back until it snaps. So you always want your mass to be along your line of thrust. The closer it is to the line of thrust, the less stress is on the spaceship. So the whole thing
have to thrust quite hard for that to be an issue in space, where there's no inertia and there's no.
Oh, there's inertia.
Oh, yeah, no, so I was just about to correct myself. Not as much inertia as thing. Obviously, when you get into like pushing, like 0.7 or something of the speed of light, then it matters because you're generating your own gravity and you just do space time. But in like slower speeds, say getting from, it's in Firefly, they don't travel particularly quickly. They get from like here to Mars in days.
Right.
There's quite a long travel. They don't have light speed. They don't have things like that. FTL.
Yeah, it's not so much as the speed, it's the acceleration. So if you're puttering along at, I don't know, 0.2 Gs, you don't get much of a lever arm action on this skyscraper. But if you're loading up to like 5 Gs, then you get a lot of bend. So, but if you go to 0.2 Gs, you can still get to the speed of light because you're still accelerating. As long as you're accelerating at a slow speed, long arms like this matter. And as for the International Space Station, it is very difficult to, you got to take a lot of care in getting it up to a higher orbit. It always decays down. So you have to really be careful because everything's off the line of thrust. You got all these solar cells and other modules going out at 90-degree angles. So you have to be very careful to nudge it to a higher orbit, not just blast.
But that's because it's relatively close and it's still affected by a little bit of gravity, isn't it? Because that's why it back pulls in. The Gateway project they're building just looks like an ISS station, and that they're going to push that over to the moon, and if they ever build it. But I always thought that you don't need to be pretty in space. That was I think what my point was. And the Enterprise is pretty. It's a beautiful ship, but you don't need to be the Spitfire. You don't need to be a Spitfire. You don't need to be an attractive machine to operate in space, unless you're going to come into the atmosphere, and then you've got a whole other slew of problems. I also like the Star Wars designs. They look amazing, but are they practical? But they actually do go into an atmosphere, but they've got anti-grav drives and things. So then I suppose it makes it irrelevant, doesn't it?
Discounting the whole issue of available energy.
Discount that. Let's ignore that.
The X-wing, X-wing is probably very well designed because everything's on close to a single line of thrust. They've got the thrusters on the X-wings themselves, and so you have a larger area where the fuselage can be in that pocket, that envelope. The TIE fighters are kind of decent too because they're narrow and they're closer to the line of thrust. There was one, and it's not the Millennium Falcon. It's where it's got a big long body and it's got a long arm, and then there's like the cockpit over here. Kind of
thing, wasn't it? Yeah.
I want to say Corvette, but I know that's wrong.
Babylon 5, the Star Fury. I have to Google it. It's been a while since I watched Babylon 5. I always thought that was a really good design for like a fighter for space. And it would have the engines, and it could flip and things, and the engines were quite wide, quite far apart, so that you could change thrust, and you could literally just. I always thought that was as if you're going to have a fighter. I'm never quite sure where the power came from or where the core was, because it seemed to be that's where the bloke sat, and there didn't seem to be a lot of space for anything else, even though they did mention it a few times. There's, like the radiation leaks and things on fighters and stuff. And I always loved the way it launched, the way it sort of had these little prongs, just go dunk, and then just dropped. It's like even Battlestar Galactica and stuff had these long shooting tubes. I'm thinking, why would you do that? You just have a door and just drop it out the bottom of the ship, surely.
Right.
Simplify, as much thing. But I always love that ship.
Hello to Walter Bishop. He says, sorry, just joined. Walter, we glad to have you. He said, in space, there's no gravity. There's gravity in space. There's gravity everywhere. Even though there may be a gravitational body 1 billion, light years away, it still has an effect on you. Very, very minor. But there's still gravity. Remember, gravity is a wave. And so,
and we were talking about creating your own. Basically, I was talking about if you.
Oh, okay.
Stuff,
right.
He's
You
not
know,
about
I'm
Mulan.
triggered.
We're not
I'm
talking.
triggered.
Calm down, American. Bloody Americans just going. Don't start a war just because he disagreed with you. If you travel fast enough, though, you generate your own gravity as well, which is what we were talking about, wasn't it? Calm down. I always just think the spaceships are designed to look pretty, and I would actually say even a lot of the Expanse ships that they spend a lot of effort to be expansive. They're very, very pretty. But I did like how they did like the big city ship on the Outer Rim one,
Right.
and it was just a big circle sort of thing, and it was not pretty at all. And I think I really like that. I think Star Trek have always just made ships that they could turn into models, and I think Star Wars is the same. They want to sell a toy, so it has to look right. But it always impressed me that occasionally when you see TV shows and they go, you know what, actually, it doesn't have to look pretty. It can be functional. And I always really like that. Do you know one thing I would make a point, though, actually, about when they were building the stealth bomber, right, they painted it black.
Yes.
The Air Force painted it black. And they always said, well, is that the best color? Because at night, actually, black isn't a very good color for an aircraft. Really, you want to paint it like a dark blue or something, because black in night actually stands out a little bit. It's also not the best color for the heat. It doesn't absorb heat as well. So ideally you'd paint it like almost like a dark gray. But they said, well, so why did you paint it black? Because you wanted the pilots to feel cool. And that's basically the reason. Like a lot of the pilots were a little bit unsure about this thing, and they wanted it to look cool.